Listen, guys, originally this was going to be a book stop in Texas, Dallas, Texas, for the bookstore Deep Vellum. It's actually the largest publisher of translated books in the United States. They're called Deep Vellum and they're based out of Dallas, Texas. Who would have thunk, right? So they also have a bookstore that's next to the publishing house. And while the majority of their stuff is translated from around the world, they also have non-translated things and they also have local authors. Very interesting store. I loved it. The people there were incredible. I asked them for recommendations, for very specific recommendations, and they gave me all the things. So that's originally what this video was going to be. And then I was looking at the books and I said, these are mostly all short stories. Now, we all have a different idea of what a short story is. I'm sure there's like a technical definition for a short story, that it must be less than some odd pages. We're not listening to any of those people because we don't care. We're book people, and a short story is a quick, small-ish thing that we can get through in a day or two. That's the most bookish definition. It moved to nonfiction, like nonfiction recs to start out with, and then I realized that would cut my book count in half because technically these are plays and these are definitely fiction. And so we're back to the short story. And I'm cheating on the short story thing, but you know, sometimes you gotta cheat. Sometimes in book life and book lore and book love, we gotta cheat a little bit. So we're gonna do this by category. That was my intro. Book friends, now you know what the video is about. Welcome back to another episode of Most Bookish. I was on vacation in Houston. I was on vacation in Texas, and I'm talking about a Texas bookstore. I did not plan that. Look at this. Again, we're in a place where books found me at the right time. This also could have been a video about clearing out my TBR because I bought these books over a year ago and I started reading them and then I stopped and I just finished. I've finished them at different times because it's a lot of books. So whatever the hell this video is, we're gonna do short stories. We're gonna stay at short stories, guys. It's gonna just gonna be short stories, okay? These are short stories to break your, what are those things called? Reading slump. Short stories to break your reading slump. I've never had a reading slump. I don't know of what this slump that people talk of is. I actually use books to like clear out all the other junk in my brain. Like when I need a rest, when I need to meditate, I'm reading either an audiobook or a live book. Very rarely an ebook, but I digress as always. But I know that the slumps are real because the internet tells me so. And if the internet says so, then it's probably a fact, right? So here are some short stories to break your reading slump. I only say that they're to break your reading slump because they're a really fantastic set of books. I asked this bookstore for books that were full from start to finish, all necessary words. I really struggle with books that add filler words, whether it's enough filler words to create a whole filler scene or enough filler words to create a whole filler character or just filler words to round out a chapter. I really would like for us to all stop just writing because we feel like something should be X size. And that's a note to writers and publishers and whoever is saying that these extra things need to be added. A book can be 10 pages and be fantastic, and it can be better than a 1,000-page book. Not all books need to be 46 volumes, 3,000 pages. Look at Lord of the Rings. They are so small, they have held up generations and generations later. They are very good books. So we have to get back to being okay with books being small and knowing that they're still a valid book. Please and thank you. This was especially important to me at that time because I had been kind of deep diving into the TikTok books and there was a lot of extra writing. Categories are plays. The thing about plays is that they're always very small because, you know, spoken word will be much longer when they act this out. And there are some really fantastic plays that you can get into. I didn't get it from this bookstore, but Madame Butterfly is a really great play as well. Plano is the play that I got from Deep Vellum. It is by a local author, Will Arbery. The note on this book was left to me by the bookstore people. They told me that there was a soundtrack that went with this play. It's by Patricia McNeil or Latricia McNeil, one or the other. And it is about three sisters and a mother and the ghosts that haunt the women in a family, also the men that haunt the women in a family. And I would say it's definitely funny. I feel like it'll be funnier if you actually see the play. Because the only negative, I suppose, that I would give to the play format as a short story is that obviously there are components that are missing. This is meant to be performed. And so the words have their own meaning and it creates an image in your mind and there are stage directions. But obviously the constructing of this by the director of the play and the actors in the play brings a whole different dynamic to your experience of this piece of art. It's, I would say, the easiest of the short story format to get through if you're in a slum, but I don't think it's my favorite. Next in the short story category is poetry. There are, I feel like, two types of poetry peoples. Well, maybe three types. There are people who love poetry, live poetry. Poetry is their jam. They're the people who do not understand it, do not care for it, and run far, far away from it. And then there are the me's who want to enjoy poetry, but still struggle with kind of the more dense formats that are much more metaphorical in nature. Like if I have to read footnotes for every line of the poem to understand the poem, the two books of poetry that I got at Deep Vellum are All the Flowers Kneeling and Bright Specimen. They both look like they are flower themed, but they're not. Bright Specimen is really interesting. And I know that I just said I don't like having to do extra things with poems. And I think that's very specific to footnotes because what I found really interesting with this book of poetry, or maybe I've just changed and I should try more difficult poems and see if I enjoy them now. I don't know. But each one of these poems is named after a particular type of flower that the poet found in the Plant Resources Center in Texas. This is another Texas author. I don't think she's originally from Texas, but she was in Texas when she was writing this. And I looked up each of the flowers as I was reading it. And the visual of the beauty of the flower with the poem, it really did add to my experience. Poetry can be an easy short story option. I feel like it's the second easiest after plays because poems tend to be shorter. And there are a lot of poets who are writing things that are easier to understand. So it's also a pretty quick read that can get you out of your slump. I feel like the whole enjoyment of reading something and facility of reading something are the things that tend to get people out of their slumps faster. And what is more enjoyable than spending an afternoon maybe in your garden, maybe next to a window, looking up different flowers and reading the poems. Now, the book is not technically about flowers. It's flower themed. It was written, like I said, at the Resource Center in Texas. It's the largest herbarium in the Southwest United States. And there's so much peace and solitude inside of this book, which I'm thinking is what the poet needed at that time. She says something at the end of the book about how it was kind of a meditation for her to spend this time writing these poems. And it feels like a meditation almost as you're reading them. She's like a free woman writing poetry in the backyard. Spring day, you can feel the air, you can feel the breeze. It's just a really lovely experience. I gave it 4 pandas. The particular flowers that she uses are like mostly poppies, water flowers, lilies, and they're like bright, they're friendly. It just really adds again to the experience of this. The other poetry book, All the Flowers Kneeling, was written by Paul Tran. This is written by Julie Poole. This one, while it is short and it is poetry, I'm not sure if it's technically easy to read to get you out of a slump. It's really heartbreaking. It's traumatizing a bit. It's the complete opposite of Bright Specimen. If you're the type of person who needs something that is really moving and transformative to pull you out of a reading slump, then this might be the option for you. Paul Tran opens the poetry collection with his experience with abuse, and the rest of the collection is him finding his way through it while being a Vietnamese American who is part of the LGBTQ plus community. His parents, but more specifically his mother, appears throughout along with a lot of historical touch points. It's about survival, finding a way to survive, and it's surviving from the actual traumatic experience, but surviving in this country. I wrote survival from isolation, survival from marginalization, survival from otherness, understanding history, and that your story is a continuation of all the stories that have been poured into you. All of the words in this mattered, the same as everything else. It's just a heavier context. Our next category is going to be probably my favorite, the memoir, guys. Let me preface this by saying that not all memoirs are short stories, but some short stories are memoirs. Sometimes it's less memoir and more of an essay collection that is memoir-like because it is factual and it is about the author's life. And that's really kind of what The Argonauts is. It's not a comprehensive memoir of her life in any kind of way. I don't think that these are essays that she had published somewhere else and put all together, as sometimes happens in these collections, but it definitely feels essay-ish in that she jumps from topic to topic while tying it all together. There's no fluid timeline. I have to say, this is probably the most honest feeling, seeming memoir that I've read. Maggie Nelson is the author, and she practices a kind of radical, truthful storytelling. The fact that she gets the people in her life to agree, the fact that she got her partner to agree is really interesting. Her partner's also an artist, so that might be why. But for that one, I wrote that it's a starkly honest account of being a woman in a relationship with a fluidly gendered person and the intricacies of whether those labels even matter to them or what they even mean as they become and then grow a family, taking on new labels of parent and in particular for Maggie, mother, and what that undoing and becoming reveals to us about ourselves and the journey we're all on. Some of the themes and the symbolism, like I said, it's like intense self-exposure. I really enjoyed this one. She references a lot of art in here. I'm the kind of person where I want to understand things, so I like when people are kind of teaching me things inside of a story, but the amount of exposure is a lot. I don't know if I would want to keep reading about her life in such detail. I like this kind of moment, but I don't know. I haven't read anything else of hers. I think it's a lot. It can feel like a lot. Memoir, I feel like, is the easiest short story to read because it reads much more fluidly than maybe some nonfiction, some poetry. It's a story about a person that's usually interesting. And so that's why memoir is my favorite. It's not just my favorite of the short story grouping. It's probably my favorite book genre in general, which is a little wild. But as I've been on this reading journey, I think I've come to that realization. The only thing is, again, there's only so many times you might want to read somebody's story. And I think this one might get a little exhausting to keep going with. That's just, I haven't done it. That's just my guesstimation though. The other really spectacular memoir that I read was given to me by Deep Vellum before it was even published. This was a proof that they sent me as part of my book box because I shipped most of this back home. It was too many books. And it was really sweet that they added this. It's since come out. You can get it as of last year. It came out late 2024. It's called Little Seed. It's by Wei Chu. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is another plant. I realized after all this that there's a lot of plant themery going on within this book stack, but this is another plant relationship going on inside of this book. So she intersperses information about ferns and her journey of becoming interested in ferns and learning how to identify them and become a kind of junior botanist. Would that be the right word? With her journey in her personal life of being a young girl, of being a young first generation Chinese immigrant in the United States, and then into adulthood. And as her relationship with understanding plants grows, her relationship with understanding herself and the world around her grows. It's really well done. I was engaged until the very end. This is kind of not a short story for probably the category of short stories. This would be a short story for me, which it was, how many pages? It was 264 pages. I feel like anything under 300 pages is kind of in short story land. And 264 is almost 250, which is really small. That's my argument and I'm sticking to it. It's worth stretching your short story muscles to keep going with this one if you're trying to get out of a slump, just because it's so good. But if you really want like a small story, this is probably a little too big. What I wrote about it is Little Seed is a Chinese American girl growing up with parents and an older brother that immigrated to the US before she was born. She takes the reader on her journey to find where she belongs and to figure out what is she, because she doesn't feel like Chinese, but she doesn't feel American. She doesn't feel Chinese the way her family feels or seems Chinese, but she doesn't feel to be American the way the people around her are American. And then again, she used her growing interest in the identification of ferns as signposts throughout the story to explain her confusion and difficulty in figuring out how to identify herself. It's very much family. A lot of stories stories of people are about family or interspersed with family. They come back to family because that's so much of our stories, right? And then there's kind of the question of what are our responsibilities to the people who made us. There's mental illness within the book, and it is a real modern American coming of age story. I loved it. It's probably one of my favorites out of this stack. The next group is going to be kind of a hodgepodge of short story in the kind of classical sense, the same story-ish from beginning to end, or like very small vignettes of fiction that can be kind of fabulistic in nature or very interspersed with history and building a kind of narrative. From Smallest, which is Dennis Johnson's Train Dreams. This is very Americana. This is set in 1917 Idaho. It's very American West. It's very little. There is a tie to the rest of these in that there's a bit of an immigrant theme, an immigrant meeting Americana at that time. And it's kind of like fever dreamish. It's not as fable-y as other two, but it feels like what could be considered maybe an American fable. It's so small that I feel like I shouldn't even tell you what it's about because I'd basically be telling you the whole story. But if you want like the shortest way from A to Z to get out of your slum, a small story where you can be submersed in it, I think that the short story, one of the detractions is that sometimes it's hard to be submersed in it because they're so small sometimes. They're only a few pages sometimes, or they're poetry, or they're play. You aren't necessarily feeling like you're in the character. This group is starting to have you in a story. It's giving enough room and depth for you to be kind of waiting in there. And if that's your jam, then check this one out. This is a translated work. It's from an Iraqi writer. It was written in 2018 and translated in 2022. The author is Dia Jubaili. It's translated by Chip Rossetti. It's called No Windmills in Basra. Basra is a city in Iraq, and while it was written within the last decade, there's a lot of commentary about the Iraq War, the American occupation, told through folk tales and kind of vignettes. Very short. All of these are a few pages. There's a couple of them that are maybe like 4 or 5 pages, but the majority are 1 or 2 pages. And it's giving you a kind of portrayal of the Iraqi people from their traditional space to the realities of where they are now because of the Iraq War. This one, even though they're really short stories, it took me longer to get through because I wanted to understand. This one's a little more dense in that way. I wanted to take my time and think about the references because they aren't all native to me. And a lot of them are interspersed with American references because of the relationship with the Americans that went over there in 2003 and stayed over there for decades and the kind of life that created. The author was born in 77, so he was definitely having an experience of that time. And we always have to remember that we are not our governments, right? The majority of people inside of a country are experiencing something that they have no real participation or say so in, same as in every country. So this is about the people, the actual people living there. If you like something that kind of takes you to another place that's unfamiliar to you, then this is a good short story to take you out of it. It's getting bigger, right? I think this next one is probably our biggest. This one is 202 pages. So this qualifies in my book, in the Most Bookish book. This is a short story, guys. Short story. Lots of short stories. You can actually read it in little tiny pieces. Now, I think this is the longest of the short stories. 257. Well, Little Seed was a little longer. I feel like this one's bigger than Little Seed. This one took me longer, but I annotated all over the place. This is in the tradition of N.K. Jemisin, if you are an N.K. Jemisin fan, and her New York series, The City We Became and The World We Make. It's in the tradition of somebody who really understands and knows New York City and has a deep love for it. It was one of the top 10 novels of the year when it came out. This is written by Teju Cole. It's not a translated book. And it's kind of moments of like deep introspection and isolation by a kind of awakening to his surroundings. He is not wandering around. It's his journey through a few months experience in this time period in New York City, he walks a lot in the city. And the amount of history, the reason why I say it's like the N.K. Jemisin, the amount of actual history this person knows about New York City is vast. Whether it is about structures, whether it is about peoples who had been there before in other centuries, whether it is cultural history, this person knows and loves New York a lot, or did a massive amount of research. But even just describing of things in the city, they know, like physically, they know the city. And that is so fascinating. Not so much because it's New York, even though New York in and of itself is a fascinating place, but more so this knowing of a place so well. I think that it's, again, I love books that teach me something, and there's plenty in here that I did not know. It has a very startling ending. He's just living regular life and wandering around. There's nothing really spectacular that happens. You find out some of his history. He is a mixture of Nigerian and German. And so being Nigerian, German, and then in New York, and having that kind of, again, identifying, not identifying that you saw in Little Seed is really interesting. He is a psychiatrist. He's going to school to be a psychiatrist when it starts. But the story is really him going around the city and this kind of association, disassociation, this coming in, going out of his life. And the way it ends is just wild. So if you're looking for something that teaches you a lot, but then is startling, if that's what you need to get out of your slump, if you need to be shaken out of it, then this is probably the book for you. We've come to the end, guys. The last in the short story collection is not a short story. I lied to you. I faked you out. Kind of, but not really. This is an enormous book. It is... it's technically only 200 pages. So it qualifies. It qualifies for us. However, it's very big. So this 200 pages is probably like 400 pages. However, again, another qualification, it is an art book. It's an art history book. So there's lots of writing. There's lots of referencing. There's lots of pictures. And so I would say more than half of the book is taken up by pictures. So we're back down, let's do our math. We're back down to a 200 page book. So really it is a short story book. If you want to get out of your slump with something that is visually stimulating, something that's going to teach you about a little something, this is an art book that talks about art history from a contemporary perspective. It is so fascinating because we experience art through a million different lenses. When, for instance, a picture of George Washington was first hung up in, what would those years be? 1783, let's say, right? That meant a very particular thing to the people looking at it wherever it was hung in 1783. What it means to us today, from our lens today, with all of the things that we know about slavery, about racism, about the full history of the Americans, and perhaps the institution that hung that painting, it changes our experience of that art. And that is kind of the conversation that this is having. And even from that time period, it's not just a time period, but who was looking at it. So in 1783, if it was being looked at by one of the slaves in that house, then they're having a different experience with that piece of art. This is a really, really engaging read. And if you want to get out of your slump looking at some really good art, because the book itself is a work of art, if you want to look at something really well done and think about it and learn about it at the same time and experience maybe a familiar piece of art from a completely different perspective, then this is how you're going to get out of your slump. Book friends, I hope that one of these books is for you. I hope that if you're in a slump, a short story will come scoop you out, carry you into the land of the non-slump with the rest of us. So you can enjoy all the other books, which I'm sure there are a lot of them, on your TBR list. And if these were not your cup of tea, if you want a different kind of book to take you out of your slump, then look through one of my playlists and you can find all kinds of things in there. You can find books that were made from movies or movies that came from books, because book always comes first. You can find popular TikTok books. You can find some really particular memoirs. What else do we have in there? We've got the stuff. We've got the things. We've got other book stops. You can find books from other places around the country. Maybe it'll be someplace close to you and you can go check out that bookstore. And if it's not, then hopefully I will be visiting a bookstore near you and you can go check out one of those in the future. So either way, I will see you in the next one. And as always, slump or no slump, I'm so glad that you guys are here with me. Bye, book friends.